Welcome to Created to Write, the podcast where we turn blank pages into finished work. Whether you're just starting out or ready to take your writing to the next level, you'll find encouragement, honest conversations, and practical strategies to help you grow in confidence, creativity, and craft. Grab your notebook and pen, open your laptop. Let's create words that impact the world together. I would love to welcome to the show today. Welcome, Brock Meier. How are you?
I'm great. It's good to be here and be a part of the conversation. I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. Now tell us a little bit about you.
I'm an old guy. I'm just about to turn 76. For most of my life, I've been involved in technical pursuits and mainly scientific research. In particular, for the last 25 years, I was involved in a United States Air Force research project. I wasn't directly employed by the Air Force, I was a contractor. And basically, what we did there was to operate experimental research laboratories for the Air Force. So it was very challenging. One thing that I think a lot of people don't understand, they think that if you talk about either science or engineering, that it has to be all analytical and things of that sort. But for me, at least, it was a very creative sort of opportunity. The people that I worked with were very creative individuals. And every day that I went into the lab, I never really knew exactly what to expect. So, in that sense, it was a lot like writing has turned out to be, in
Mm.
that let's say you're writing a novel, writing a story of any sort. At least the way I work, I'm kind of a pantser more than I am an outliner. You never know exactly where the story's going to head. Your characters can really surprise you. They may have things up their sleeves that you never expected. So I transitioned out of my technical career. I retired from that about 3, 4 years ago. And what I've been doing since then has mainly been applying myself to writing. One thing about myself, you talk to a lot of writers and you say, well, when did you first learn that you wanted to be a writer? And you'll hear a lot of people say, the first time I held a pencil in my hand and I touched that pencil to the paper, I knew I wanted to be a writer. Or when my parents read me books, I knew I wanted to write books myself one day. Well, that was never me. Though in my technical career, I did a lot of technical writing. That's totally different that compared to the writing that I've done since. And when I first really learned that I wanted to be a writer, it kind of caught me by surprise. I had gone to a critique group, a local group of, it was mainly ladies at that time. I think it was 7 or 8 ladies and myself. And I had been invited into it. And I thought, well, this could be really good. I could learn a lot about the writing craft. At that time, I was just writing, I had 3 different blogs that I wrote, nonfiction blogs, that I just wrote about things that interested me. And I thought it would be good to talk with other writers and learn from them to kind of sharpen my writing. So, in the process of doing that, and I won't go into the details of the story because it's quite convoluted, but a woman there who was both a novelist and a poet had shared with us a recent book that she published of poetry. And one of those books of poetry totally captured my attention. And in the end, even though I never guessed that I was going to write a novel, out of that connection that I personally ended up with the poem, I ended up after 6 months, I found myself having written a 128,000 word novel. I was
Wow.
never going to write a novel. When I talked to these people in the critique group,
Mm.
people that were writing novels, like one guy there, another gentleman joined us after I'd been in the group for about a year. He was just finishing writing a novel. And I said, Henry, this is great. I love this novel you're writing. How long did it take you to write this? And he stopped and stroked his chin and thought about it. He said, I think it took me about 10 years. And right then and there, I thought, I'm never going to write a novel. But the way it worked out for writing this novel is that this poem so captured my attention that it was just in a deep emotional connection. I found myself waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning with a scene playing through the video screen of my mind. And I found I couldn't get rid of that scene until I wrote it down. This was when I was still working 40 hours a week at my scientific job. So it just goes to show you that even if you have a lot of responsibilities in your life, it's possible to get things done and actually write a ridiculously long novel in a pretty short period of time.
Yes.
That remains an unpublished book to this day. I've heard so many people say, never publish your first novel or your first work. So I've kind of taken that to heart. Although my wife keeps saying, you need to publish that. I love that book. So we'll see.
Maybe it just needs a revision, and now that you've learned what you've learned, you'll be able to apply it.
Maybe so. Maybe
Mm.
so.
So tell me, Brock, what has been the most amazing part of your writing career so far?
I think the most amazing part is part of what I first told you about how I got
Mm.
into it.
Hmm.
That even if you think you can't write, or maybe you don't want to write, but somehow that idea of a story intrigues you, I think that's the thing that really is amazing to me, that powerful stories can come out of me and come out of pretty much anybody out there. I think pretty much anybody really has some kind of a story to tell. And
Hmm.
it may not come out in a book or a movie, or it may be a poem, who knows? But I think everybody has some sort of story to tell. And it really has surprised me how other people have found a connection in the story that I wrote. So
Yeah.
that's part of it. And another amazing thing that I think has come out of it is I've met other people, encountered other people because I wrote this book that I never would have guessed I would have met. That really has surprised me as well.
That's very cool. And tell me, were there any lies that you thought about writing that you had to unlearn or push away?
I think one lie is that you can't write a book. And when I wrote that first novel, totally unexpectedly, it just absolutely poured out of me. It wasn't even that I had to try and keep it going, I couldn't stop it from going. And when I got to the end of that, it's like God said to me, Bill, see, you've written one book, you can write another book, and you know what that story has to be. So I think that's probably a big lie, is that you can't write, or you can't write effectively. I think a lot of people have talked about the imposter syndrome, that as we write, there's those words that come into our head that say, you're not really a writer. You know, what you're writing isn't really worth somebody else reading it. So I think that's a big lie to overcome.
And you mentioned hearing
Has been
from
for me. Go ahead.
mm, you mentioned hearing from God. How has faith shaped your writing?
You know, that's kind of a strange thing to think about. When I first started writing, even when I was writing blog articles, people would ask me from time to time whether it had to do with writing a novel or poetry. I've written some poetry, or blog articles that I wrote, do you write Christian novels? Do you write Christian poems? And that always kind of takes me aback because I think, well, I'm a Christian. So I guess that means that I write Christian stuff. But I think a lot of people have the idea that that means a certain specific thing about writing, about your writing. To me, my faith informs my writing. So I write from a Christian or a biblical worldview, but I don't know that a lot of people would call my writing Christian. And in fact, the novel that I've published, though it's actually one of the true stories from the Bible, I've written it in such a way that that's kind of hidden. I've tried to stay as absolutely close to the story as I possibly can. That only forms a pretty small part of the book. It's an 80 chapter novel, and that specific story only encompasses directly 2 chapters of the book. And the way that I've written it, I've used a lot of the original names and verbiage instead of the way those things have been translated into English. So I think a lot of people can read that who are not believers and read this and think, wow, this is a really unusual story. I never heard anything like this. I wonder if there's anything more about this. And I've really written it more for that audience than for a Christian audience. I think a Christian audience might say, how can that be? How can that be Christian writing? So that's the way it works for me. Is to me, my faith informs my writing more than I write overtly or specifically about it.
I like the way you term that. I think I'm going to use that as well, that my faith informs my writing. Yeah. I like that very much. Now, there's a big am I a pantser? Am I a plotter? In that there in the world, I did hear you mention pantsing it. So, do you want to tell us
You
a bit more
did,
about your
you
writing
did.
process?
And it has kind of changed somewhat over the years. I write historical fiction, mostly biblically based fiction. And when I wrote my very first novel, which wasn't, it was historical fiction, but it wasn't biblically based. When I wrote that, that was absolutely 100% classical pantser because, and if your audience hasn't heard those terms, probably most of them have, but being a pantser means you write by the seat of your pants. You just start with a story, you just start going for it, and whatever happens, happens. And you don't really think about it so much ahead of time and write out a full outline of the plot and all that. And that's exactly the way that first book worked because I wasn't even really in control of the process. It was something that was just purely pouring out of me. Well, now that I've been writing more historically based things and the fact that they intersect so much with recorded history, I have to go back to things like for the first book that I published, which is based in first century Nabatea. Probably most people don't know that the name of that kingdom, but their capital was Petra, which most people have heard of. Nabatea was the country, the kingdom, right east of Judea, right east of the Jordan River. And there's all kinds of things interrelated between those two kingdoms. But when I started getting into writing that historically based novel, because you have to be in that real world, at least I do. I think some historical fiction writers, they just use that as kind of a rough, very rough foundation of their work, and they just go from there. And if they write alternate history, well, that's fine with them. But I really try and stay close to that. So because of that, I read a lot of archaeological studies and papers, things of that sort, the Bible as well. And that kind of brings into it the need to have some idea of how this thing fits into history. So I found myself more and more going into the outlining world. I don't really like that. I would rather personally just write right off the top of my head. But I found that I kind of have to get some kind of a balance there.
Mm.
I found that as I've been writing recently, more and more short stories, that because the story is so short compared to a novel, you don't have to so much be, I don't have to so much be concerned about outlining and fitting into all the details of history as it presents itself.
Mm.
So that's kind of my evolution as a writer. I started out purely a pantser. As time has gone on, it's forced me to become more and more of an outliner.
And how do you know when that story's ready to publish or to release to the world?
That's kind of a difficult sort of thing. Most writers will tell you that they're never really done. Even from and this is just a technical aspect of writing, even proofreading, which you would think is purely a technical thing, very deterministic. There's not a lot of subjective work going on there. Even in proofreading, almost any writer will tell you, doesn't matter how many proofreaders I sent it to, doesn't matter how many times I've proofread it, doesn't matter how many times AI has proofread it. After it's out in the real world, it's escaped my office. It's out there for the public to read. I get 6 or 7 responses from readers saying, oh, you missed, here's a typographical error back on page whatever.
Yep.
So even from the technical aspect, I don't think you're ever done. And that's just the way it is. But I think also from a story aspect, you never truly know when it's done. There's a wonderful writer. I don't know if any of your audience has ever read him. He's an Argentinian writer. He passed away quite some years ago. His name is Jorge Luis Borges. And he's kind of thought of as the Shakespeare of Argentina. And I read a long interview with him one time. It was really fascinating. He mainly wrote short stories, and he said that the reason a writer actually publishes is so they can be done with it. I think there's some truth in that. When you publish it, it's out there, and yeah, we live in the digital world, so we still can make pretty easy edits on it and changes. I think there's some truth in that, that at some point you just have to wash your hands of it and say, I'm either tired of it, I need to get on to something new, or whatever. So I kind of take all those things into my mind, and when I'm done, I kind of figure that out.
And it's been awesome having you here on the show today. And for those people who are still watching and listening, please hit that like and subscribe button because it helps the show to get out to more people. And tell us, Brock, what are your last words of wisdom for wannabe writers or new writers out there?
I would say, first of all, really believe in yourself and really believe in whatever story that is deep in your heart that somehow you feel must get out. A story that God maybe has given you, you feel. And if that thing just keeps nagging at you, for instance, the novel that I published, that story had been bouncing around inside of me for probably 20 or 30 years. And I knew I had to do something with it. And it turned out to be writing it as a novel. So I would say, whatever story is in there, believe in it and believe that it's important to get out there. And then the other thing, the secondary thing, which is very important, is to not give up. Even though you get tired of writing, just keep at it, keep working, keep learning from other people. Critique groups can be incredibly helpful there. So just keep after it. And at some point, that story will escape from your own mind and heart and get out into the world and accomplish that for which it was sent.
Great advice. Thank you for sharing today, and thank you for joining me on
Yes,
the Created to Write show.
that was great. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for hanging around till the end. If you've enjoyed today's episode, I'd love for you to leave a review and share the podcast with a friend. And while you're at it, jump into your favorite bookseller site and leave a review of a book you've loved reading. Until next time, keep reading, keep writing, and always remember you were created to create, and perhaps you were created to write.